Hello. I never know how to start these because nothing's really happened yet. I'm kind of roughing the eyes in a little bit. I'm gonna clean them up a lot from here. A couple different ways and a couple different steps. But as I'm drawing the eyes, I do want to establish real quick my kind of idea for how the head was postured was that she would have her kind of chin tucked a little bit, so her head would be facing downwards and she'd be looking up at us slightly. I want to establish that right away because it's gonna explain some decisions I make. So I do want to just make sure we get that out of the way, especially like how I drew the eyelashes, how they're so kind of thick and over the eyes, with nothing really coming up, and also the nose that I'm drawing here. It goes through a couple iterations also, but you can see how like the nostril is kind of higher because her nose tip is pointing downwards because of the angle. Yeah. The big reason I have to say is that I need you to trust me on this because when I draw her ear, it's gonna look really high. But that's just when you tilt the head down, the ear is in relation to the face higher. I've had real struggles with getting the size of the mouth right when I draw it, so I've just pulling them into place. I don't know why that is. I swear I used to be good at that. So I'm also kind of deciding that she's basically sideways and turned towards us. In addition, and I spend altogether way too long trying to figure out her shoulders. Yeah. Then, because I spent so much time on the shoulders, I wanted to make sure you could actually see them. So she has an off-the-shoulder top. It's very cute. It's very summery. Here's the ear. I could have stood to rotate it, but then I would have had to adjust the jaw a lot. It's kind of like sometimes proportions get a little funky in stylization. You know, like a good general rule is that you have like an eye width between the eyes, but if you draw really wide eyes or large eyes, it just really messes up with the face if you try and keep to that. Like it would make the face very wide. So sometimes you have to decide. So in this case, because of how her head is tilted, it should realistically be kind of, her ear should be kind of tilted so that the earlobe is a little farther out, but then I would have had to draw her jawline farther out because the ear kind of locks in with the jaw. And I didn't want to do that. Just trust me. It was purposeful. I made decisions. Look, I even tucked her hair behind her ear because it was purposeful. I made decisions. But here I am just kind of deciding where my shadows are going to be, because when you have like a lot of hair, it can just be a block. You have to kind of differentiate it a little bit. Also, if you've noticed me like zooming in, zooming back out, that's just like my personal version of flipping the canvas so I can get my bearings. So in terms of kind of brush, I think I'm using the default gouache brush in Procreate, just both to paint and also to kind of smudge, and I do that for most of it but not everything. For whatever reason, I did most of this on one layer and then I went over with a couple more layers afterwards for finishing, but I wanted it to blend together well, so I wanted it on most of it on the same layer. Here I'm adding a little bit more pink to her skin because I usually add a lot of blushing and I didn't. Oh, I had to add it a second time because I messed up my highlight the first time. Oops. I kind of don't like the skin color, so I do adjust it before I get the hair in. I make it a little more pink, like cool tones, rather than this neutral that, as I was working on it, I felt increasingly off-put by. But just kind of trust the process on this. I don't love how she looks at this phase, really. I'm adding a bunch of highlights now. This is I start to like her more around now. Up till this point, I was panicking a little bit, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes, especially when doing something a little more painterly. There are a lot of uglier phases. But yeah, I just felt it looked very flat and muddy before I added those highlights, and I was like, oh, I do know what I was doing. It was all correct, I just hadn't finished it yet. Yeah, there I am making it a little more pink. I just felt like it looked a little sickly before. So I'm adding the hair in here. And the interesting thing about like how working with the gouache brushes is that it is not fully opaque. So I'm doing it over the background color and I'm letting it be transparent. And that's a big part of it, that I like how it kind of blends between the skin and the hair to have this like semi-transparent kind of painterly brush that I was using. And adds a lot of variation in the colors, even if I'm just using one color, which makes it easier because I don't have to color pick as much. And kind of choose my color. Oh, here I was toying with the idea of putting my kind of color layer over my liner. I end up not doing that, but you can see me thinking about it. The gears were spinning, ideas were happening. They didn't go through. I didn't go through with them. Here I am putting kind of the minimum I can in her little shirt because it was not the focus of anything. I just wanted it to look acceptable. Well, I added a little bit more kind of coral to her lips because after I made the whole thing more pink, I felt like they looked a little too cold, like especially after I added the hair color and everything. But I did like that her skin tone and everything turned out cooler than I usually do. I usually do a lot of corals and oranges and warm skin. I find it's easier to avoid making them look ghastly that way. But not everyone has skin that's super warm, so it's nice to occasionally try to make cooler skin tones work. I think it worked out here. But here I am kind of adding a bit more dimension to the hair. And kind of shaping things a little bit. Yeah. See, here's the thing. I know what's coming up, but I want to wait until it's actually on screen to talk about it. Here is the overlay with the, I think it's on multiply. That's at least the vibe I was going for if it's not actually on the layer style. And it's more of a purpley bluey on the cusp. Pretty light actually in terms of color, but multiply makes it be kind of darker, obviously. I did purposefully carve out a little bit of that shadow from the hair over her cheekbone so that you knew she had one. Yeah, I just felt like things were still looking a little flat, and I wanted to pump up the contrast, and I didn't want to risk ruining everything I'd ever worked on so far. So just adding a bit more on top of what I already added. Also, because I can kind of go over things without worrying about messing up what's beneath. It was just a lot quicker that way. Here I'm adding the highlights, obviously, for the hair. I think I'm still using the gouache brush for all this. I do, change because I do like hair streaks and things like that, like hair strands. And that I use a different brush for, which I don't even know what one it was. It's not one of the default ones, but also I just like looked up several years ago, looked up like free Procreate brushes. So like it's out there. You could find it. I didn't pay money for it. I know that's not very helpful, but both the sketch and the one I do for the individual strands is not a default brush, but both of them are free. I have not spent money on Procreate brushes because I am not currently willing. That's one of those things where I'm like, if I was made of money, it'd be really nice to support my fellow artists, but I am not made of money. So, yeah. And I wanted I was going with like that cool tone theming, but I didn't want her eyes to be the exact same color as her hair because that would kind of blend in together. So I gave her green-ish, but it's more of like a dark forest green. It's definitely not like a leaf green. It's very close to the blue end of the spectrum. And her hair was, blue closer to the green end of the spectrum, so just a little bit different. Wanted to stand out against each other. Here I am just like adding highlights to the background, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of shadow on the other side. I just felt it looked too flat for how much space it covered in the image. I didn't want to do a background, but sometimes I just like to do like little shadows like that. It makes it look like she's standing in physical space. Like now it looks like a wallpaper. She's standing in front of a wall. Here I'm adding a bit more highlight. Using that to kind of define that her mouth is kind of pulled back. With where the light's coming from, I'm highlighting more of the side of her nose because it's coming from kind of the right of the image where I highlighted. So it's hitting the side. And I'm pretty soon I'm gonna start highlighting stuff, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I know. Well, actually, I'm erasing out, aren't I? Yeah. Whenever I erase my line art out, I do like to make a copy and save the original and just hide it. But that's because I'm nervous I'm gonna ruin it. There's no other benefit to that other than peace of mind. So I'm being pretty cautious with where I erase out because there are lines I like a lot, like especially around her nose and mouth. I'm erasing some of it out, but I'm being very selective. Whereas with her hair, I'm kind of like, a lot of this needs to go. Yeah, especially where it overlaps. I'm cleaning up the kind of paint layer after I've erased the line art because it exposed some secrets. I don't fully clean it up. I've been going for recently, like, the level of cleanliness where, like, zoomed out, even on a pretty big screen, you're like, oh, that looks good. And then zoomed in, you're like, oh. Not in a negative way, but just like, oh, I didn't realize it was so messy. Because anything more than that is how you end up spending 8 hours on a piece, and I know from experience. So, I spent 2.5 on this. Which, hey, that's an acceptable level for me right now. It's fine. Here's the paint over. Fun fact, I was initially envisioning doing an entire paint over, and then I felt tired. Physically, my wrist hurt. I was like, I'm not gonna contribute to my chronic wrist pain for this. Like, I'm trying to avoid tendinitis. I think I probably already have it, but I'm trying to avoid it. But yeah, I'm just kind of adding some more kind of detail to her eyelashes, really completing the effect of like you're looking through her eyelashes at her eyes. They're kind of over top. And also making them blend with her hair more, especially since her eyebrows, are light too, like they're the same. they also get a paint over because I felt it was weird that they were right next to her eyelashes and they were so much less finished than her eyelashes since they're both hair. I do not do a paint over for the entirety of the hair on her head. I do hair strands, individuals. And that's, yeah. Here we go. Just adding a little, well, I try several times before I like it. But just adding a little more flow and a little more life to her hair. By adding a little more oomph. But we're getting pretty close to the end, but I do believe I do just a few more highlights at the end after this. And, you know, again, cleaning up stuff. Because I'm leaving it slightly rough. I'm not leaving it horribly rough, you know. I do have standards. Here I'm painting over kind of the part a little bit. Just to make it clear how the hair is folding. Cleaning up the kind of join with her face. Here's the highlights. I think this is the last thing I do. Unless I'm misremembering. This is like my friend. Oh, I added highlights on the eyelids and then I get rid of them because I think they're too much. And I'm like, that's tacky. Not necessarily, but I just like, if you do the eyelids, you kind of have to do like the cheeks. And then I'm like, and at what point will it stop? So there she is, my finished coral. I hope you have a nice day.